So now we're going to take a look at developing the railings. If you refer to your notes, you can see here all the dimensions you'll need to lay out the railings. Keep in mind that we're going to use a hatch, a solid hatch with color 255 or the no plot color, just so we could hide the line work of the remaining elements that belong to the window behind the railing. We want to make the railing look or appear to be in front of the windows. Alright, so let's take a look at our model. Again, because we have symmetry here, we'll just focus on one side and then go ahead and mirror to the other. Now to begin, let's pull back a bit and let's take a look at what we have here in floor plan. Now we already projected the lines that represent the walls. We're done with that, so I can just eliminate that. Now we have to show where these posts are. Okay, and this is going to be the posts that hold up the cantilevered roof there, as well as the beam above, but to which the railings will be attached. Okay, so what you'll want to do here is you want to show the columns. So let's make the construction line layer current. Okay, and you can see there's the 4 columns. Let's just work with this half. And first, let's create rays so you can locate them in the elevation. So from this corner and this corner, we project the location of the columns. Since they're the same size, we could select both of these and just do a copy selection from one base corner to the other. Right? Now, since we already completed the outline of the building, you can see right here as we zoom in, right? Here's the outline of the finish wall, and here's the profile of the column. Okay? Now, what we're going to do here to finish this off is later show the beam that goes across that's going to be situated on top of these posts. Just to give you an example, let me zoom out of here and zoom into here just to show you. So here's the top plate. You're going to see we'll be able to finish with these 2 lines here that represent the beam. And here's the posts. Alright, so let's just continue with this part here, and then we'll finish with that part. So, before I proceed, I need to locate those columns in the elevation. I already have the construction lines there. So the next thing I could do is switch layer and use the A column layer. Again, I could either match properties or just trace over it. So here's the top of the deck. We're coming all the way up to the plate line. I can just copy that. Right to there. And I'll just trim off this little portion. Remember, this is going to be the rim joist on the front of the gable, right? It's going to be actually in front of the column and in front of the beam there. So now as I proceed here, let's look at the railings. Again, I want to switch layers. I can use this button right here. We'll go ahead and use the, actually we have our own rail layer. Okay, so we'll use that one. And now it doesn't matter how we start here, but let's just do the railings that face us. And if you look at your notes, we can show the top rail and the bottom rail and then the intermediate rails. So looking here at the rough floor, we have an offset going up 3 1/2 inches. 3 feet and 1/2 inches from here going up. So this is our top line of the top rail. Let's clean it up here. Just going to trim there and trim there. I'm leaving this little bit here because there's that other part of the railing that comes down this way, which we'll look at later. And then for the top rail thickness, that's 2 inches. So now I'm going to offset towards the bottom. So 2 inches towards the bottom. That's the top rail. Now the bottom rail I show here as 4 inches from the rough floor. So if I offset 4 inches, use this line here, offset towards the top. Let's clean it up. So I'm using trim, enter, enter, so I can use any intersection here to trim away my line work. So that's the bottom of the bottom rail, and that's 1.5 inches thick. So I'll offset again, 1.5, offsetting this line towards the top. Okay, now for the railings there, we're taking a look at 4.25 inches from the post. We've got about 1.5 inches for each rail, and about 5.25 inches spacing, right, from all the way left to right. So let's take a look. Here's the column. Let's offset first 4.25 inches from left to right. Let's trim it up. This time I'll use this line here and this line here to clean up the rail. I can use match property or MA. Now that's on the right layer. The thickness there is 1.5 inches from left to right. And now to produce the remaining railings, all I have to think about is the spacing from center to center. And that's 5.25. If I select both of these lines and I use array once again, okay, notice the arrows that you have here. You can indicate the direction, the total length, right, just by clicking to that other line. You can see here, you can put in the numbers of columns. We actually have just one row, right, just one row. And if you look here, the distance between the columns here would be 5.25 inches. And then here, the total number of columns. Let's try first 25. And actually we have, 25, 24, 20, let's do 22, 21. And there we go. Okay? Now that's why you want to use array. You don't want to have to offset, keep changing the offset. You could do copy, but you're incrementing the 5.25 inches. This way you can just come back and modify it as needed fairly easily, just using the associative array. Alright, when you're done, you can close the array there. And now we could just focus on the railing that comes along down the stairs here. So what we're looking at here is this part. We have the top rail, and then down here at the very bottom we can see one of those intermediate rails. So take a look at those dimensions there. And let's come back over here. Now notice I left these two lines here, right? They're the outside lines of the top rail and the bottom rail here. From the column to the outside of that top rail is 2.25. Okay. Now, this is going to come down 4 and 5.5 inches, right? So 4 feet and 5.5 inches. So first, if I want to match properties, like that, you can see I can trim right here. And for that, I'll just do a fillet. Remember, with the fillet, you can create a fillet radius of 0, right? If I offset now, this is going to be 1.5 inches from left to right. There, you can see the thickness of the top rail. And remember this line here? So if I extend it all the way and then trim in between the column there we go. There's that detail. Now here's the two lines of the top rail, right? We've got a distance from this edge here, which is this edge, We have a distance from there to the end of that top rail as 4 feet 5.5 inches. So if I offset, enter, 4 feet 5.5 inches, I could use this line and then offset it towards the bottom here. You can see this is where it would finish. So this is where you have to be very critical, right? Pay attention to what you're trying to do. I'm using extend command. And notice, look at all this line work here, right? How are we going to show the correct draw order, right? You have these lines here that should be in the back, and you have these lines here that represent that top rail that should be appear to come forward. Okay, I'll show you in a second how we'll do that. We have this little extension here, so let's clean it up. Okay, now we've got a bottom rail there of 1 inch. So here we could do a couple things. If I find first the middle, right, the midpoint here, you can just bring it all the way down and then offset to either side 1/2 inch. Offset to either side 1/2 inch, and then go back and delete that line. So there's that railing there. So we got all this line work here that we want to adjust the draw order. How do we do this? Well, first locate the line work. I know that it's this right here, these lines right here, so I'm just selecting the line work right now. And as I look here, I've got these two lines and the line here that is the bottom of that top rail. And what I want to do here is, with those lines selected, I want to make sure that they come to the front. Now obviously what I could do here is I could trim all of this line work too, right? I could trim that line work. There's nothing from stopping me from doing that, right? You can do that. But if you don't want to spend that time, you could just hatch it. So look at this. If I freeze the floor, right? it looks like it didn't have everything in the right layer, right? There you go. Let me undo that. Let's make sure everything's on the right layer too. So let's match properties. Remember, these are the two railing lines right here, but we should make sure that this, all these lines here are on the right layer for rails. Right? Because I think we use these to, we use the lines from the floor to offset. So let's try this again and see if we did this correctly this time. Just the intermediate there, right? The array. Again, let me undo. Whenever we have an array object, we want to edit the source, right? So we select it and edit it. Let's take a look, right? Let's look at the properties here. So this is actually a good teachable moment. You can see the layer varies, right? Let's make sure it's on the correct layer, the rails. And that's, why is that locked? Okay. And then we can save the changes. So again, is everything on the right layer now? Yeah. Okay. So let's freeze the floors, and all we should see are the rails, right? So this is the time that we could use hatching. And one thing about hatching here is, again, just think about how you're organizing your drawing. This is an elevation view, and the reason why we want to use hatching here is so that we could work with draw order in a way that we could show elements that are in front, hiding the lines of the elements that are in the back. And so for that, if I use the 255 color, it'll just white it out. So I'm going to use freeze and freeze the elevation construction lines here, and that way I can minimize what I see in my drawing. Alright, if I'm not sure, I can once again make sure I just get all this line work and bring it forward right click, draw order, bring it to the front. Now when I do the hatching, you could put it on the same layer if you like, okay? Or you could create a separate layer. Later on, when you're doing the color and the pattern for the finishes, I would strongly recommend that you create a separate layer for hatching. So here, what I'll do is I'll just use hatch, okay? I'm going to use, for color 255 right here. For the pattern, it's going to be solid. The areas that I'm going to hatch now, also, you want to make sure that you're using associative. And what I'll be able to do here is click inside the areas that represent the rails. So there's one. Here's the other. Here and here. Don't forget this little spot right there, right? And then each of these rails. Now, again, you might think that, well, maybe I should have just done one rail and do the hatching. But you got to be careful, okay? Because if you do it all at the same time, it's literally going to repeat all of the hatching. This is why I'm doing it separately. Okay, so I'll just, oops, not that one. Let me undo. Get right between the rails there. And let's zoom in a little bit so we can see it. Just go one by one. And remember, we're just doing one side, so the other side is going to be a simple mirror. And the reason why I want to do all of this hatching all at once is because it treats it like a single object. Okay, and I hit enter to finish. Now I got to make sure that all of this stays in the front, right? So once again, it doesn't hurt because now I have also the hatching, right? I also have the hatching. Looks like I missed that one spot there. And I want to bring the whole thing to the front. Alright, so now if I come back up here to my layers, let's show the floor. Now you can start to see everything together here, right? You can see the other columns there. And what I could do now is select everything that I just created. So that would be all the railings here. Make sure I get the right ones here. Hope I got everything there. Feels like I'm missing a rail there, but let's see. There we go. Okay, so we got everything there. Now I'm selecting everything here so I can then use, let's say, the midpoint here, right, to mirror everything back to the other side. So I'm just using those 2 points that I selected right now to make a mirror copy, right, and that's how I get the other side. Now as we proceed, obviously we're missing the windows and the door, but that's all that's left, and also our attic vent. And just before we do that, let's go back to the column layer, and we'll go ahead and draw in the 2 lines that represent the beam. So from left to right here, now remember we trimmed this one back so we could just draw a construction line from this end point here, just a horizontal, right? And then we could offset 8 inches towards the top. It's an 8-inch beam, and then we can use our line work here to trim. Okay, and we got that. Now, as we proceed with the windows, here's what I would recommend. Here's the A-glaze layer. Remember, since we have layers for these elements, you can see how I can start to freeze that information, right? If I don't want to see that information, I just want to focus my attention on that, and then turn on my construction line layer once again, right? Notice here how with our stairs, I guess we'll need to turn that on for a second, right? We use these lines here to project the columns. So once we've done something, we can go back and get rid of it. All right, so now let's proceed with the windows.